Success is not a destination you reach, but a journey you keep adjusting while staying true to who you are becoming. In my conversation with Kevin Bulmer, the Real Success Navigator, we explore together calling, course, and compass as core leadership tensions. It challenges how you define success when achievement and capacity no longer align. Like this episode, subscribe to our channel and DM Future to continue the conversation. My name is Arjan Visser, human-centered futurist and your host. Welcome to the Alt Journey podcast, Kevin.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy our discussions, so this will be fun. I'm grateful.
I'm looking forward to it. We already had a lot of fun and so many cliffhangers before we even started to record today's podcast. So I want to just throw in the hard question. How do authentic leaders honor their calling, chart their course, and trust their inner compass in a complex world?
I think step one would be the recognition that that's even what you might be trying to do. I often hear myself saying, you won't find what you treasure by following someone else's map. And the actual treasure itself is rarely what it first appears to be. So whose map are we following? Where did we get it? Why did we choose it? What do we think it's leading us to? And why would we care about that? And so that's probably the basis for a lot of conversation. One of the things that I love about the chats that you and I have had is that we seem to see a lot of things in a very similar way using different language and analogy. And so you've challenged me to think about my own experience and ideas in new ways. And we'll see whether the next time that we're about to enjoy together does the same thing and maybe challenges some of the people who are joining us. I hope so.
I like how you describe it. And in a way, you say the real success is not just about reaching a destination, but it's actually all about learning and navigating well to not hunt the treasures by going on existing paths, but actually to become a pathfinder yourself.
Well, every good story, I mean, it needs conflict to be interesting. You've talked about a hero's journey. I sometimes, when I start keynote talks, I'll begin them with a once upon a time, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. People start smiling because they recognize, oh, he's getting ready to tell a story. And then I'll have fun with suggesting we all know what makes for a good story. You wake up, it's a beautiful cloudless day. You step outside, you wave hello to everybody, feeling very grateful to be alive. You walk through the meadow and then across the mountain into the castle and kiss the love of your life and live happily ever after. And everybody frowns like that's a terrible story because nothing happened. Unless it's our own story that we're talking about. Then as soon as the conflicts come, as soon as there's a dragon in the path, as soon as a storm blows up, well, then we judge it. We want to change it. We think that's not the way that it's supposed to go. So whatever language we want to put to it, treasure, goals is another good one. I love what Bob Proctor said about goals, that goals are not to get, goals are to grow. And in the terms of a story, they have a word for this in Hollywood, the MacGuffin, the plot device, that it's the thing that gets you moving forward into the journey. So it gives you the desire, the conviction to begin to have the courage to move forward. And I use as a success navigator, and I like the word navigator because that's what life is all about. We're constantly navigating. It's like being on the ocean. The ground never seems to stay still beneath you for very long. I feel like you asked at the outset about how do you honor your calling, chart your course, and trust your compass. Well, the calling is the first thing, and maybe that's the goal or the whatever it is that you sense that is uniquely calling to you. That if you're open to that and receptive to it, that alone that's a really important step that I know for the first part of my life, I wasn't even really looking for or open to. So even if you're open to receiving that, and then we could have an entire discussion about what is that and where does it come from. But then if you're courageous enough to recognize that calling, understand what that knowing is, and then actually put a plan together to pursue it. And using the sailing ship analogy and the treasure analogy, okay, we think our treasure's on this island. We're going to mark the X on the map. That's what we think that we want to get to, that's going to get the story moving forward. So we make a plan to move toward that. That's what gets the story going. That's what gets us into the game. In the sailing ship analogy, you're provisioning the crew, you're getting food and beverage on the ship, you're getting extra supplies, you're planning on how long that you think it's going to take. So it's a smaller percentage of people, I think, that actually get themselves to that point from just even recognizing the calling to begin with, as opposed to just choosing, well, I want to try and go and get that because somebody else has it. That might be what we have to do to get moving forward at some point, but it's different from a calling, which we could explore, I guess, if you like.
Yeah.
But it's a smaller percentage, Arjan, I think even still from there, that actually they've recognized the calling, they've put their X on the map where they think their treasure is, they've actually made the plan to move toward it, and then they cast off into open water. Because that's where it gets real.
That's what gets real.
That's where the storms happen. That's where the whole story unfolds, and sometimes you end up achieving that destination that you originally set out for. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be as fulfilled as you thought you might be when you get there. A lot of things are going to happen in between, and there may in fact be another calling between A and B that calls you to C. And anyway, it's I don't know if I've just lost people. It makes sense to me, but it's a lot of fun to think about.
Well, let's try to get them back on the map then. The You mentioned a couple of things. You quoted Bob Proctor when you said, goals are not to get, but actually they're an opportunity to learn.
Goals are to grow. Yep, that's what
Yeah.
he would say. Goals are to grow.
Goals are to grow. And reminds me of a podcast I did last year with Mark Fritz, and he mentioned that if you know how to get a goal, it's a plan.
Yeah.
Call it a plan, execute the plan. Goals are entwined with that you don't know how to get there, because that's the journey, that's the growth, that's the learning. And that's what you bring back. And so putting the X on the map about your treasure, your calling, actually, like you said, when you get open on the open sea, and I love sailing boats. I love sailing, but it's also a great metaphor for leadership in that sense, because all the attributes they have huge significance. Um, but it's I tend to say it's not just the calling. You have to recognize the calling. You have to discern and honor it, which I think is already the first challenge. And then the second challenge is, how do I answer the call? And that's an identity question. Like, how do I answer it? Who am I becoming during that learning journey to get to what I'm called to get to? Even if that is just in maritime language, a beacon to find out what the next beacon is. Then you navigate close to the beacon. Don't hit it. You don't hit the target. You just navigate to the next one. I think the first question is, how do I discern and honor the calling?
Well, sometimes it starts with the goals. I mean, sometimes it's about moving forward and about getting into that experience. Um, Another phrase that I've heard that I like a lot, when you don't know or when you know what you don't want, that will help you understand what you do want. So I think especially when you're younger, it's natural to look at these other models of success that we think we may want to experience ourselves. So we try and go and do the thing and we achieve the goal. And I think it's important to get to that point and to have the experience of that sort of emptiness of like, I thought I was going to feel a certain way once I got this thing. Once I had the trophy, a certain amount of money in the bank, the title on my business card, the relationship, the marriage, the whatever it was. My experience, Arjan, was that for the first part of my life, and when I say first part, say maybe the first 30 years, but especially once I was in my late teens to my early 30s, I didn't use this kind of language then, but I now look back and I think, man, I was kind of a master manifester. I didn't get all in my way with overthinking and the how and all of that sort of stuff. But I did not have much of a level of emotional intelligence or anything like that, and I did have a fairly chronic level of anxiety that, again, that's not a word I would have used at that point in my life. It wasn't until I was in my late 30s, early 40s when that life that I was building blew apart on me, divorce, and business failure, and all of those kinds of things, that I really began to ask myself the questions of like, well, what am I doing here? Like I've achieved all of these things that I grew up believing I was supposed to achieve and want to do, and yet I still feel this, whatever you might want to call it, loss, uh, emptiness. I mean, at that point, it was a deep despair because I remember thinking I've done all of these things I thought I was supposed to do, and I look around and my life is just wreckage. So what am I supposed to do now? And that I'm 52 now at the time of this recording, or just about to be, and I was in my late 30s, early 40s when this work started, and one of the things that was a sea change for me was reading about an exercise where you imagined yourself at the end of your life. Not you're casting your mind forward to the end someday, but imagining, no, like right now, here today, this is it. You're going to be done. And now look back on your life from like up to that point and ask yourself, was it a complete success or was it not? And if not, why not? And that's a trickier question than it sounds like it might be, because I think what our minds tend to do is immediately drop again into the comparison game. Did I have the things that other people have and did what they did, do what they do, have all of the products that the advertisers are trying to sell me or whatever it is? And then that exercise led me into another conversation about values. And I remember at that point thinking, well, values, what do values mean? Like I'm a nice guy. I don't break the law. I pay my taxes, this kind of thing. I believe in fairness, honesty, integrity, values. But diving deeper, I'm like, no, like what do you value and what do you not? And in what order, I found was really important.
Yeah.
So as a for instance, it's easy for me to say, well, I value my time and my relationship with my sons more than I value my work, say. That seems obvious. I learned it's important to put them in order because when life turns the screws on you and you're under pressure and you're fatigued, depressed, whatever it might be, those are the moments where we're going to choose in a way that we may regret when we get later in life. So during that period of time, as a for instance, I'm in Canada, in Ontario, Canada, so we have long, cold winters, and my youngest son was a competitive hockey player. There were a number of times where we might be, say, in the middle of February, and he's got yet another practice at 9 o'clock at night at some ice cold arena, and I've got work that needs to get done, a deadline looming, and I know that another parent would probably take him and save me the trouble. And I would always go back to that exercise, and I would think, okay, well, what am I going to regret if I choose differently in this moment? And so I always, unless I'm being chased by a metaphorical saber-toothed tiger and have to choose differently, I will always choose whatever is higher on that list of things I value. I realize this is a really long answer to a short question,
Yeah,
but
let's try
it's
to
there's a filtering through that.
yeah.
So in terms of a calling, maybe we can get into, like, what does that feel like? What is a knowing? How is that different than making a pro con list or just conjuring up out of your ego, out of your intellect, what you think you're supposed to do, how life is supposed to go, but really understanding at a deep level so when I call myself a real success navigator, I mean, what is real success? It may be something completely different to you than it is to me. But what I've found is that if it's coming from that comparison game, it's going to leave you wanting. You're never going to get to that, what you call belonging, what I call enoughness, the other side of the moon. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. I will take a breath so that you can interject.
Yeah, what you said at the beginning connects to the end. At the beginning, you said, um, actually, your earlier answer was takes courage. It takes courage to discern your calling and actually answer your calling. Um, Comparison tends to kick in once in a while, and I think it was once our default. So when we say, if I know what I don't want, I can define what I want. That's a good start. But later on, it was not about what you thought as the opposite of what you didn't want. That just got you starting in the journey, got you to the first goal. And before you got there, slowly, there was more clarity, there was more awakening, which with hindsight started to come because you had the courage to start moving. So you don't need to understand the goal before you start moving. You need to hear, in a way, the calling, have the courage to answer the calling, and the knowing that you know will come along the way. And the cognitive reasoning will one moment in the journey also appear, but it's not the starting point. And you started to discern that's what you share, that values matter. And then I would put the word matter. Maybe that's the important thing. It's not just your values, but it's what matters to you. And to not deviate, you prioritize, you rank them. But at the end of the day, you want to walk and embody what matters to you and be that foundation in all relationships, even those that receive your value, what matters to you. So it will matter to them. So in a way, that relational connection is with the people around you is connected to the relational connection you have between the calling and your answer. Your story really emphasizes that you need courage. Just start. You need to start writing. And that is, in a way, exploring your authorship, your authority along the way, along this navigation on the wild waters of life. So, and it's not the conventional story. It's not the matrix of these are the success factors that you can tick the boxes and you have the outside world sees that you are successful. That's not what success is about, is it?
Well, you and I had we were just talking before we started about that the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment, and in terms of the story, I mean, for us, I guess the story is it's the whole thing. People would say, well, it's about the journey, not the destination, but then they're trying to reach a certain destination, or they're trying to hold the story in place so they feel like they've got control of it. And again, I like the analogy of being out in open water. All of this changes. Your values change, the next calling changes, the next knowing changes. So it's not a destination. It's a constantly evolving, moving, expanding process. So then what is the real treasure? So maybe we could go back, because there are a couple of phrases here that I think are, at least for me, are really important. Calling is one of them, and knowing is another one. Calling, I feel like it shows up as it's something that at least for me, I receive, I recognize. Anybody who maybe have seen the old movie Field of Dreams, where Kevin Costner's character is in a cornfield and he hears a voice, and what it tells him to do doesn't really seem to make much sense, but he knows he's heard, felt, experienced this. He knows he has. And I feel like in those moments, if you're even open to them, you sort of feel a charge. There's a juice to it when you cast yourself forward in your imagination of what what would it be like if I were to actually do that, whatever that was. This isn't something that comes from making a pro con list of what to do, or just conjuring a decision or comparing with somebody else. It's something that you receive, you recognize, that lights you up. And what I have found is the more I move into those things, even though, or maybe even especially when they don't make sense, magical things happen. But it doesn't mean that it isn't going to test you. It means it probably will. And the real trick is to continue to honor that well after you're in open water and the storms are beating the heck out of you. The other is a knowing, a full body, spiritual, energetic, cell level knowing about something. And I think any of us who have been around several decades probably understand what this feels like. The first time, or the one that I can really recall that's front of mind, I mentioned earlier about going through divorce. That situation in 2010, 11, I was married almost 12 years at the time and thought I had a good marriage. And she entered into another relationship, and I tried to hold it together. We had 2 young boys at the time. It was at that time, Ariana, it was not just what I thought I wanted, it was the only conceivable outcome that I believed could be the correct one, the noble one, you keep things together for the kids, for the family, whatever, and I tried everything I could for months. It was a really dark period in my life when I think back about what that time was like, because I couldn't, my ego, my intellect could not conceive of another path other than keeping it together, despite the fact that it was like drinking emotional and spiritual poison day after day. Even standing here talking to you, I can remember what it felt like the moment when I knew. It was like just being touched on the shoulder by some other entity, that it was just, it's okay, let it go. It's time to move on. It was a knowing. And these knowings, I think these are the things that get people into relationships, out of relationships, starting businesses, leaving jobs, moving to other continents. That what happens after the knowing is that your ego, your intellect goes crazy. But your body and your being, it's almost like an out of body experience, because you're just following that knowing, that you're, metaphorically walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and that intellectual voice is just, it's having an all out panic attack You can't leave this house, you can't leave this job, you've got this bill coming up, you've got this responsibility, and yet you're just moving forward anyway. What is that? That's a knowing. In my experience, though, those are at 2 slightly different levels, and the more I can be in tune with the callings, it's a little it or maybe a little bit or a lot gentler
Mm.
to follow those, and then it moves you along from thing to thing. Um, but I think both of those are really important to recognize, and if I were the version of myself that were or that was, in my 20s or 30s, I wouldn't even been able to engage with this conversation. I'd have thought, "What these 2 guys are nuts. Like, what the heck are they even talking about? Like, you just do this." So in that sense, I feel now somewhat fortunate that I've had that experience of that real foundational break and shift because I still remember very much how I felt, and I feel like I'm very aware of where and when I'm struggling,
Yeah.
and to try to take my own medicine, as it were. Um,
Well,
but usually that calling is there, and it's just whether I'm gonna trust it or not.
yeah, you, your example, although it sounds like disaster, and it was back then, it hit you. It put you off guard, out of balance. Um, that could even happen when you are very successful to the outside world. That if the knowing is not connected to the circumstances or the achievement, you can resist the knowing. But it's a bit like the magnetic field of that compass. You have to navigate it. And the knowing, you call it an out of body experience. And it's interesting how you've built that up. Actually, it was an out of intellect experience.
Exactly, yeah, that's well said.
And I had my share in those out of intellect experience. And it really feels like an out of body experience. It feels that sometimes even that you see yourself from the outside, which is really strange. But actually, in a way, it's just outside of your capacity of understanding, and your knowing precedes your understanding. It can go way deeper. And without making it fluffy, listening to your story, I think you really have to trust your knowing because it reveals about who you are becoming. And you have to trust it more than your understanding, your intellect, your reference framework. And again, that feels like competition. It is competition because only one can lead. And I think we confuse clarity and direction with understanding, cognitive, intellectually. And the clarity and the direction is way more connected to the discerning of our calling, the unique definition of what success looks like in relationship to who we are and who we are becoming, which is it's back again to one word: courage.
Well, you've touched on something that's been really front of my experience recently, Arjan, and that is that I feel that we as humans have a very low tolerance for ambiguity, which is problematic because it's what most of life is. We were we were talking a little bit before we started of how I've been really playing with and interested in the idea of being a category of one. From a marketing standpoint, that's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. Something that's unique, remarkable. And I've been sort of feeling my way through that and thinking about the creative heroes that I have. I do think it takes enormous amounts of courage because I've experienced it myself, and I've seen with so many other people. I lead a small business support community, hundreds of small business owners and entrepreneurs, and I'm constantly seeing them expressing some level of frustration or self-judgment about how they recognize they've got the conviction, the courage to move forward into this thing, and yet they're frustrated that they don't yet have the clarity on exactly what their unique selling position or value proposition is, or ideal customer or price. It's like, how could that be? How could I know that I've been called to this thing and show the courage to express it, to change my life, to embody it, and then still feel this self-doubt or this judgment about, what I view to be like sort of surface level language. Here we are, we're talking about intellect versus something that's heart and felt. I have found through that community and the events we've been running that I'm actually saying out loud things like, I'm not trying to reach your head, I'm trying to reach your heart. And part of it is very selfish because I know I can't reach your heart through my head. I've got to get to your heart. It's not something we say, it's something that we feel. So you can come up with whatever language you want for your perfect elevator pitch or positioning statement. And yet, if it doesn't feel right, like, you can sound perfect, but the energy is off, the feeling is off, we're probably not going to continue into a relationship. In terms of something unique or remarkable, because in marketing speak, people say they want to stand out, but that goes right against human nature and people's inherent need to fit in. The very low tolerance for the ambiguity of showing up and not exactly being able to articulate the way that you think somebody else would understand. And their perception, by the way, is not up to us, but we keep trying to control that, as opposed to just trusting whatever has called you to be where you are. So back to the category of one, let's suppose you receive a calling, an idea, a whisper from the universe to express or to do something in a way that is unique to you. Where does that come from? It's something that's beyond us. But paradoxically, we end up expressing that in a way that makes whatever we're doing unique, remarkable. Well, if it's going to be remarkable in any way, then that means that there's going to be at least a period of time where some other people aren't going to recognize it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be remarkable. But it
Yeah.
can't be a category of one if it's not, which means there needs to be some tolerance for ambiguity and the trust in whatever that calling was. Here's where I think is really interesting and kind of paradoxical, Arjan, is that as that starts to resolve itself and people start to engage with it from a feeling place as opposed to an intellectual place, now it starts to catch. It starts to become its own thing, its own brand, its own category, which through the expression of that singular, like unique to that person or organization expression, seems to serve the whole in the best possible way. So is it a category, including the people that are following that calling and making that expression? So is the category of one meaning like, no, it's singular, it's just you, it's your unique expression? Or is it, or in addition to that, the thing that serves the one, the whole, that we're all one? Because where did that thing come from to begin with? And then it goes back into it. I don't know if what I'm suggesting makes any sense at all, but I feel like that you were talking earlier about capacity, and that's a word that I've struggled with because I have a tendency to tell myself a story of that I'm overwhelmed or I don't have enough time or I don't have enough resources. So if I think about capacity, I think, well, I'm already at capacity and now I want to expand it. I've been thinking about more of like being a conductor, of allowing things to flow through. And a word that you've used in some of our other conversations, belonging, and what I would call enough or enoughness. I wonder if that's where you get to this place where you can really trust that constant process to flow through
Yeah.
you. That's going to have edges. It's a constant game of course correcting, discerning, expressing, integrating.
I love to listen to you, and I should have interrupted you because now I have
Well, I
the
just
challenge.
wonder if you could even do that unless you're standing on the other side of the moon. I'm not sure if you've ever expressed that metaphor or not, but Forgive me for
Well,
interrupting you.
we recently we flew around the moon,
Yes.
and now we have the photo that the other side of the moon is not the dark side of the moon, unless light is shining on it. Um, the interesting thing at at the beginning of your long answer was that you said we don't have enough tolerance for ambiguity. A horrible word for a Dutch person to pronounce. Um,
Being misunderstood
being misunderstood,
or
and
just
that's
not having the answers.
exactly. And you connected it to embodiment. You only embody something when you don't collapse, when everything around you becomes uncertain.
Mm,
So we want clarity, but we have to be real. Is our clarity external validation of that we are doing the right thing? Then the proof is in in the validation, and the proof should be in not collapsing. If we don't collapse it, we embody it. It passed the test, and then we can move on to what we said earlier, to grow again, to learn again. So there is the next opportunity opening. And the clarity should be in that we embody it, that that what we know, now we see that there is substance. And that's where the understanding starts to happen. When we embody things, we start to feel it. And maybe just before it embodies, we start to feel it, because the feelings get so lost when the pressure is put on. And after feelings, the reasoning grows, the understanding grows, the intellect, the head catches up. And that helps us to close the chapter and be open for the next chapter. But the next chapter starts with that we cannot rely on what we understand. And then let's call it intuition, feeling starts to happen again. So every time it's this working all together, like the oneness is not that we are one thing. No, it becomes wholeness, and everything works together, and everything has a role, and some is leading and some is following, and then they flip flop. It's like this infinity loop of feeling, sensing, reasoning, hindsight, foresight. It is, in a way, if we want to nail it down, what is really happening right now, it becomes really complex because there's so many elements. But when we go back to that we start to feel that we know, and we know that we know. So trust the heart. That's always looking for new things, and not our head, who always wants to repeat the former success because it wants to avoid uncertainty. So that's why the courage is, it's not emotional, but it is a feeling.
Well, I think it takes courage and a high level of awareness to tolerate that ambiguity. See, we don't like to feel things that are unpleasant, but there's value in it. And in my experience, it takes a lot of courage to just sit with something until clarity comes. And then that's where the knowing kind of comes back in. But we don't tend to do that. We make things binary. We blame, we justify, and then we want to choose door number 1 or door number 2. So and sometimes it's immediately apparent, but sometimes it's not. And in the times that it's not, I feel like our default is to try to choose one path or the other, which is in itself, in some cases, if you're not completely clear, if you don't have that knowing, a bit of a self-soothing mechanism. If I just choose this, then I don't have to deal with that. And that may get you along for a little while, but if you haven't sat with what needs to be sat with and felt what needs to be felt and experienced what needs to be experienced, it's going to bring you back. You're going to come back in a loop like a level to a video game that you haven't finished. It will knock you back down. On the sailing ship analogy, one of the things that I um, I feel pretty strongly about is a framework that I call drift, drag, anchor. Suppose you're out there in open water, and most of us are in this life. This is an analogy. Things are always moving and shape shifting. Some days are sunny, some are stormy, some are calm, some are not. We all get set adrift now and then from a variety of things. Could be any number of things, personally or professionally, where we look up one day and we just kind of recognize, how did I get here? If those things aren't acknowledged and worked on or corrected, they can turn into a real drag. They can turn into something like a marriage breaking apart, for instance. And those things drag on us. And I always say, whatever drags on us personally is going to drag on us professionally. And the reverse is also true. Whatever drags on us professionally is going to drag on us and affect us when we come home and in our personal relationships. It's always amazing to me how little we tend to think about the drag that just about everyone that we're interacting within the world is dealing with at some point or another. Most of them are, or they will be, because we all take our turns in different seasons. And that affects performance, that affects clarity, that affects discerning, that affects knowing, all of it. Here's where I think it really gets interesting, Arjan, is that when you go, I'll use myself as an example. So I went through divorce and had some other things in my past where I felt like I'd given everything that I could to the situation and had every intention of staying in the situation. And yet the other people that I was in that situation with ended up choosing something differently anyway. When I know that what was in my heart was that I was doing absolutely everything I could to serve that situation positively, and that I was committed to stay in it and, making it work. But it went another way anyhow. So counseling, therapy, podcasts, books, conversations over coffee with friends like Arjan, that you can examine it and repeat it and justify it and form focus groups about it and frameworks to deal with it. And that if you're beyond a healthy understanding of maybe what the pattern is, the danger is that drag can be turned into an anchor because it now becomes part of your identity. The people I love are going to leave me. The situation that I serve is just going to break apart anyway, or whatever the pattern might be. And now you imagine yourself as that ship out at sea that's anchored, that's tethered in place to something. Regardless of how justified the existence of that anchor might be. Some people have been through some really horrible things and have every reason to be anchored to certain beliefs, behaviors, parts of their identity. Regardless, once it becomes that, you're tethered to something. Now a storm blows up.
Yeah.
Would you rather be just free and blown sideways, not necessarily where you want to be, or would you rather be tethered to something? And that storm is going to beat the ever-loving hell out of you.
Yeah.
That's what I see happening to most people in the world, that we're just passing our pain around on each other and we don't even realize that it's what we're doing. That rather than, we could think about thinking positive and being more motivational and be grateful, and by all means do all that. And also, if we could be just a fraction of a percent more aware of how often we are reinforcing the story of our pain and passing it along to other people with our energy, with our actions, with our comments, with our whatever it might be, and reduce that by just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent, I feel like the positive consequence of that would be near incalculable. But I don't hear anybody talking about that, of how once something is anchoring you, you have really two choices. You can remain justified in that because of all of the experiences that you've encountered for that to be the case, or you can cut the line.
Exactly. Or you
And
go
it takes a
down.
lot of courage to cut the
Yeah,
line.
but or you go down. So, in just a few sentences, because I love this example you give about the draft, the drift, and the anchor. How can leaders stay authentic while they are navigating the growth, the responsibility, amidst all this complexity that they look for or hits them? How can you stay authentic?
I think having a a better understanding of yourself, and like I say, whatever drags on us personally is going to drag on us professionally. What are we even bringing to the situation? So there's a four-point framework that I would call with trusting your compass, but rather than north, south, east, and west, I would say it's awareness, acceptance, forgiveness, and focus. So awareness is like, how would I choose to feel? And then ask about, okay, well, how am I feeling about this? And then notice that without judgment. That alone, we could talk for a week
Yeah.
just on if you're honest and open with yourself, the amount of information that you're going to get about how you communicate, how you've behaved, how you've chosen in certain situations, how you feel about interacting with certain people, why you're making decisions, what's driving those patterns. It's absolutely huge. The next step on that acceptance, I think there are two sides to it, Arjan. One is, what am I resisting that's beyond my control? As simple as it sounds, a lot of us do that. It's straight out of the serenity prayer, because accepting something is not the same as approving of it. There are things that are unjust or inconvenient or problematic. When they're beyond our control, the sooner we accept that they are what they are, it frees our energy and attention up to look for solutions rather than be riveted to the problem. Now, the other side of acceptance, and something that I've personally really struggled with, is what am I holding away that might add positively to my experience? A lot of us don't know how to accept compliments, help, other suggestions. Some of us are really poor delegators be, because we're nice people, but we're maybe to a fault people pleasers, which can make leadership really difficult because you struggle with candor, which is kind of unkind not to be clear, and it's difficult to be clear when you feel like you're putting on somebody because you don't know how to accept their help and their input. So there's awareness, acceptance, and forgiveness. And I don't mean forgiveness as some moral high ground. I mean it as, what would I be better off letting go?
Releasing yourself.
Cut the line.
Yeah.
You've heard all of the different analogies about, um, I mean, it was the opposite of forgiveness is drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die or something like that. It just, like, if you think about all of the things that you've experienced that you could justify, again, back to awareness, how would I choose to feel? Well, then the next question that comes right behind that is, well, how do I feel? Well, I feel anxious. I feel afraid. I feel resentful. I feel angry, which is sometimes going to be the case. And then you can run it through the framework. Well, what am I resisting that's beyond my control? Is there help available to me? Are there good things that I'm holding out of my experience? And you get around to forgiveness. What weight am I carrying that I could just set down?
Yeah, so this helps. This is like a, I would not call it self-care. I would call it, this is a hygiene level that is part of your journey of answering that call. You can't go there in naive. There is some level of maintenance, checking, preventative maintenance
Mhm.
that you need on your vehicle, your vessel, um, to continue the journey.
Yeah.
And drift is one thing. We talked about the clarity. We talked about the courage. But there's also your perspective, your hope to take charge of, and for the lack of a better word, of that destination that you can imagine. And you mentioned it earlier. It's not about the destination. I totally agree. the weird thing of our brain is we can't imagine who we are becoming, but we can imagine where we are going. So when we imagine our destination without fixing on it as a goal of success or failure, then now we can imagine who we are becoming by the journey when we get there. So that all strategic insight of Covey, with the end in mind, or like you said, where do you want to be at the end of your life and see that as success in a way that is throwing out your anchor to the future and see it as an invitation, a substance, an imagination, an illumination maybe of that calling, and it helps you to get there. And don't be angry when it looks different, because probably you've heard the calling through your current paradigm, and your paradigm will shift along the way as well. So how can people get hold of you?
realsuccessnavigator.com is my website, and everything about what I do is there, including the small business support community that I mentioned earlier, which is called the Little Engine Small Business Support Community. That's another story in terms of why it's named that. That's a free online resource hub for small business owners, entrepreneurs, sales reps, creative types, people that believe in connection, collaboration, or if you want to stay in touch with me, that's a great way to do that. It's free. Just enter your email and just click on that page on my website. But in terms of speaking or coaching, my book, Script Change, a look at unlearning and rewriting life, it's all at realsuccessnavigator.com.
I'll make sure that all your details are in the comments of the podcast, and I really encourage people to have the courage to connect with you and navigate their own journey. So to bring it all back to, well, we're not landing because we were on the ocean, but to bring it back to shore, what are the 3 things that you think that you've learned that you want to take away with you or encourage others with to take with them?
Just in terms of my journey overall?
The podcast. Yeah.
Or
What are the
in
3
just in
takeaways?
from this podcast? Well, my first is continue to listen to and engage with Arjan, because I just treasure every chance that you and I have to have a discussion. I've been flapping my lips a lot more in this one because of the nature of this conversation. But I've really come to value the way that you articulate your thoughts and look at things, and so I'm very grateful. Um, Other takeaways, I don't know. I think we've gone over a lot of them. I would encourage people to lead with dignity, create with courage, and then to do what we were trying to unpack there. Honor what's uniquely calling to you. Do your best to discern that as you go forward. Chart your course as best you can from where you are, and that's going to continue to change. And the destinations, the goals, whatever you want to call them, it's a constant shape shifting situation. It's supposed to be like that. The contrast, the struggle, the dragons in the pathway, the storms, those are all part of the story.
Yeah.
And the trust your compass, that's just right here. That's you'll feel it. You'll know it. And the more you practice it and the more you engage and allow yourself to not just tolerate but embrace that ambiguity, to trust that you'll know when clarity comes, the better and better you get at it and the more fun the whole thing is.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the one thing that I want to add is don't neglect your self-care, your maintenance. We could call it we reflect, and that builds the learning and the knowing transition slowly in understanding, but it's more like don't drag things along. Don't get stuck in floating circles because you're anchored, and don't drift off course. So work on your awareness. The 4 things you mentioned: the awareness, the forgiveness.
Awareness, acceptance, forgiveness, and focus. And ironically, the one that you just mentioned, that's one of the most challenging knowings to honor because I think that if you're really in tune with yourself and your energy, you'll know when it's time to sit on the couch, as it were.
Yeah.
And if you have any sense of ambition at all, you'll probably fight that. But it's important to give yourself grace and space, and to also trust that that same voice will call you off the couch when it's time. That's a do as I say, not as I do, but I'll continue to work on that.
Wow. Thank you very much, Kevin. I really appreciate your openness, your heart in living this and sharing this with us. And I want to thank everyone that was with us, listen till the end. And I really encourage you to be courageous and not just put this aside as a nice conversation, but really take it as a spark and take on what's meaningful for you and apply it in your own journey. So please share. Social media works with comments and interaction, so please share. We love to interact, but we also love to welcome you next week in our next podcast. And if you can't wait, we invite you to DM Future and join us in the All Dialogue, a weekly space where peer visionary leaders pioneer and ponder these authentic leadership questions we have been talking about today as well. Just DM Future and I'll make sure you get the right information. So see you there, and thank you for being with us.